everyone, welcome back to Story Time. We are currently reading The Willigrews by Terry Tarbox. He's a local author and he's very kindly said that we can read his stories for story time. So thank you very much, Terry. So now we will be reading chapter 3 of The Willigrews. The Willigrews and Heafod. It was a normal happy day in Willigrew. At the chickweed beds, a small group sowed seeds while others weeded among the plants. Crowfin, the Confused, as he was now known, was having a rest, sitting against a rock, drinking a cup of chickweed tea. Next to him sat Roosin. They had been sitting quietly for a time when Crowfin turned to Roosin and asked him a question that would bring about the most exciting adventure the Willigrews had ever had. "Who do you think was the first Willigrew?" "I haven't a clue," answered Roosin. "Do you know?" "No," Crowfin replied. "That's why I asked." They decided that they would really like to find out, and that their leader Bromgley was bound to know. Later that day, when they had finished work, they went to see Bromgley, who was helping his wife Yill to prepare dinner. "Hello, you two," he said as they entered. "Would you like to stay for dinner, Crowfin, old chap? There's plenty to go round." "No, thanks all the same," replied Crowfin. "I don't like my food going round. It makes me dizzy." Bromgley chuckled and told Crowfin he would keep his plate still. Crowfin thanked him and took his place at the table with the others, who had now been joined by Father, Bromgley's other son. Before they ate, they observed the Willigrew tradition of sticking their fingers in their ears and singing together, "Thanks for the chickweed, get stuck in." When they had eaten, Crowfin turned to Bromgley and said, "We've got a question for you, haven't we, Roosin?" Roosin nodded. Crowfin continued, "We were wondering if you knew who the very first Willigrew was, and if you could tell us about him." Bromgley sat thinking for a time. Yill said, 3:10. Having got the time, he stopped thinking and said, "Do you know, I haven't the slightest idea. I've never heard anyone tell a story about the first Willigrew." They all agreed that they would like to find out, so they put a poster up on the notice board outside the meeting hall, where all the Willigrews met on the third Saturday in the fourth week of every quarter in any month that didn't have a W in it. The poster read, "To all Willigrews, would anyone who knows anything about the very first Willigrew please contact Bromgley as soon as possible, or, if possible, sooner." As Willigrew was not a big place, news soon spread about the notice. It was not long before a queue formed outside Bromgley's house. Bromgley saw them one at a time, and Yill made them each a drink. The first Willigrew to see Bromgley was called Striff. He told his leader that he remembered his grandfather telling him a story about a very old Willigrew called Clodger, who had to outthink a brain that had escaped through someone's ear and was frightening everybody. Bromgley also remembered that story and said, "Good thought, Striff, but in the story there was mention of Clodger's father, so he couldn't have been the first." Bromgley thanked Striff, and the little Willigrew left. Next to enter was a very old wise man of the tribe called Cload, whose bones creaked as he moved. He sat, and after getting his breath back, he spoke. "I don't think you will find a single Willigrew who knows how our tribe started, but there is a strange thought in the furthest corner of my old memory that is telling me something. Yes, that's it," he said. "Deep below the earth, in a giant cavern, lives a creature with a small body and a gigantic head. It once lived on the surface, but every time it learned something new, its head grew a bit, and eventually it started sinking into the ground. You see, the more it knows, the deeper it goes. Its name is Heafod, and it would certainly know." Bromgley replied, "Well, that's a marvellous idea, old wise man, but if he lives so far underground, how on earth are we going to find him?" "Not on earth," said Cload with a chuckle. "Under earth, you mean. You must first find the home of the red badger, who lives in the forest north of here. Then, if you can pass the test, he will let you into the tunnel that leads to Hefod's cavern." "I'll have to hold a meeting to see if we really want to find this Hefod," Bromgley told Cload. He thanked him and asked Yill to tell the Willigrews, still waiting outside, that they could go home. Later that week, a meeting was held at the meeting hall. The whole tribe attended the meeting, and after much debating and discussing, it was decided that the majority wanted to find out about the first Willigrew, and that Bromgley plus 2 male and 2 female Willigrews should go. The 2 male Willigrews were Crowfin and Longstint, who was in the army. The 2 females were Zambarina, who was a history teacher, and Dora Dingbat, who had no special skills but was fun to have around and would keep the party cheerful. The party met outside the meeting hall at daybreak the next day. Zambarina looked very intelligent and thoughtful as usual. She always carried a book, The History of the Willigrews, around with her and loved to talk about the past. She considered spectacles too modern, so wore a monocle on each eye. However, her eyes were blue, her lips were pink, and she was just as beautiful as all the others in the tribe. Dora, on the other hand, always looked happy and up for a laugh. She had 3 little curls on the top of her head, a beauty spot on her left cheek, and a tiny pair of spectacles balanced on her little button nose. She always wore cherries, fresh every day, for earrings, just in case she felt a bit peckish at any time. Crowfin was about 5 minutes late, because when he left his home, confused as usual, he walked forwards, which to the Willigrews was the wrong way, so ended up further away than when he started. Bromgley greeted everyone. "Well, here we all are," he said. "And off we all go," said Crowfin, chuckling quietly. He gave a little hiccup and scratched his head when he bumped into the meeting hall door. "Wait a minute," said Bromgley. "I want to say a few words." Everyone fell silent. Bromgley stood proudly before the group and said, "A few words." With that, the little band of adventurers set off towards the forest of the north. As they walked, Dora Dingbat entertained them with a really silly song, which went something like this. "Quitchy pitchy poo, waggle gaggle noo, niggly noggly matey, eat your chickweed daily, wonky nonky woil, dinky plinky stoil, stibby stobby stubby, it will keep you chubby." Then the rest joined in with the chorus. "Niggly womp, diggly flap, all day long, wimmily woo, snobbly bum, can't go wrong." Then they all hopped backwards, flicking their earlobes, which was the Willigrew national dance. They all stopped dancing, however, when up ahead, blocking the pathway, they saw a crowd of creatures. The Willigrews approached carefully, not knowing what to expect. And how could they, as I haven't even decided what's going to happen yet? The crowd up ahead consisted of beings that were about the same size as the Willigrews, but completely hairless. Bromgley could tell they were in an ugly mood. They were carrying banners saying, "I feel like a bent nose," and "I feel like a cauliflower ear," and "I feel like a big lump with hairs sticking out of it." As the Willigrews neared the mob, one of them stepped forward and held up his hand, with his other hand. "You can't come through here, brother. This is an official picket line," he said gruffly. "Well," said Bromgley, "we would never dream of crossing an official picket line. We are Willigrews, and we never do what you think we wouldn't do, or what you think we would do, except when we don't." "But why are you on strike?" "You see," explained the creature, "it's like this here. We are the brothers, and I am Freighter, the shop steward. We exist to put things right for the underprivileged and put upon workers of the world, workers who've been sold down the river and left all at sea and up the creek without the paddle. Like." "Ah," said Bromgley, "and who are you supporting this time?" "Well," Freighter replied, shrugging his hairless shoulders, "nobody at this precise moment, 'cause there's nothing happening. But we're just practising, so as soon as we are needed, we'll be ready like. Oh, yes," he continued, "as soon as an offer's on the table and our brothers don't like it, we'll be away." "But we have no intention of breaking a strike or anything," said Bromgley politely. "You sure?" asked Freighter. You sure you're not a bunch of blacklegs? Certainly not, said Bromley, bristling with indignation. As you can see, we Willigrews all have green legs. Well, I suppose we could let you past, said Frater grudgingly, but only if you donate something to our union funds. At this point, Crowfin shouted, Willigrews eat chickweed, not doughnuts. Ignoring this remark, Bromley took a bag from his pocket and offered it to Frater. What's in here then? Frater asked. Nothing, said Bromley. Nothing? Exclaimed Frater. What do you mean, nothing? Well, exclaimed Bromley, one day when you're standing around with nothing to do, just open the bag and you'll find some nothing to do it with. It's a lot better than something, you know. You can find something any day of the week. Something can be found anywhere. But just try looking around for nothing. You'll have a job. Thanks, said Frater, but I've already got a job. This bag of nothing will come in handy, though. Where'd you buy it? In a shop, answered Bromley. It's just down the road. It should still be open. An open shop? Gasped Frater. We can't have that. We only allow closed shops. We're off. Frater and his followers rushed off in the direction Bromley had indicated, leaving the Willigrews to continue their journey, which they did, after praising their leader for being so clever and getting the brothers to move out of their way. However, Bromley had just told a lie to get his friends past the picket line, so, as was the tradition among Willigrews, he had to recite a little rhyme. Dibby dib dib, I told a fib, but it was for the best, so let my conscience rest. Then the others join in. Dobby dob dob, we all heard it, but it didn't bring harm, so it won't cause alarm. When night fell, the little band was under a tree, so it didn't hit any of them. They made a camp there, lit a fire, brewed some tea, and then sat in a little circle. Zambarina spoke first. Weren't we lucky to find this little circle to sit in? She said. But before anyone could reply, a voice which came from behind some bushes repeated exactly what Zambarina had just said. What was that? Said Longstint. What was that? Said the voice. It's an echo, said Crowfin, as the body to which the voice belonged came out of the bushes and walked over to the group. That's right, the creature said. An echo. That's what everyone calls me. Calls me. But you're a Willigrew, said Bromley, because she certainly looked like one. No, I don't only copy voices. I copy bodies as well. It's really good fun. But what do you really look like? Asked Dora. I can't remember, said Anne. It's so long since I was myself. Well, I'll be blowed, exclaimed Crowfin. An echo. I thought that an echo was a repetition of sound produced by sound waves reflected from an object denser than the aerial medium. Just goes to show you. You can say that again, said Dora, and Anne Echo did, much to everyone's amusement. While you're here, said Bromley, would you like something to eat? No, thanks, replied Anne. I don't like food. It repeats on me. Everyone laughed again. I'll be on my way now, said Anne several times. I'm so glad we met. The Willigrews waved goodbye and Anne Echo disappeared back into the forest. After she had gone, the little band settled down for the night. Early next morning, Bromley was the first to rise, but soon came back down when he hit his head on a tree branch. Wake up, you lot, he said softly. They all had some breakfast and started out again, trudging along the woodland path. I trust everyone slept well, asked Zambarina. I don't know, said Dora. I was asleep at the time. It was another 3 days before the Willigrews saw even a hint of what they were searching for. They found a large sign which read, This way to the Badger's secret set. Beneath these words was an arrow pointing towards a narrow path. I reckon that could be a clue, said Crowfin. Not much gets past you, replied Bromley. They followed the path for about an hour, and then they came upon a smaller sign, which said, Nearly there. After a further half an hour, the path widened into a small clearing. In one corner was a large hole with yet another sign above it showing an arrow pointing down and the words, This is it, folks, the Red Badger's secret set, but don't tell anyone. Everybody ready? Asked Bromley. They all nodded, so in they went. Inside it was very dark and damp, but they soon came to a wide cavern which was lit by a group of glowworms. Sitting in the corner behind a desk was the badger. "Oh, isn't he beautiful?" gasped Dora as she gazed at the creature, who was indeed covered in completely bright red fur. The badger heard this, smiled and said, "Thank you. You too are beautiful, as are all your friends. In fact, everything and everyone is beautiful today. I'm in such a happy, diddly-bumptious mood." "Dilly what?" asked Longstint. "Dilly-bumptious," said the badger. "Some days I feel woggly-nymphous. Some days I feel noggly-bamptious. But today I feel dilly-bumptious. My name is Red Badger," he continued, "but my friends call me Red Badger for short. So, how can I help you?" Bromley replied, "We were wondering if it would be possible to meet Heaford." "Heaford?" roared the Red Badger, the sound shaking the cavern wall. "You want to see Heaford? Did you say Heaford?" Yes," said Bromley timidly. "Oh, I thought that's what you said," said Red Badger, smiling suddenly. "Why, certainly, dear boy. But first you must pass a test." "Okie dokie," said Crowfin, prancing on the spot like a boxer getting ready to fight. "We're ready. Fire away. Lay it on us, baby. We can handle tests. We're Willigrews." Everyone stared at Crowfin, who stood still suddenly and dropped his eyes in embarrassment. After picking them up and putting them back in, he apologised. "Now," said Red Badger, moving on hastily, "on that wall behind the curtain is a question. Yes, just one question. If you can answer it, you may enter. Be warned, however, the journey to Heaford's cave is a perilous one, and it is possible that some or even all of you may never return." "We're ready," said Bromley bravely. Longstint stood to attention, saluted and said, "We're with you, leader, to the death." "Righty-ho," the badger said, drawing the curtain back to reveal the question. "But think carefully before answering, as I can only accept your first answer. So this is your starter for 10 and no conferring." 10 points, I said. That's all you need. 10 points. And what do points make? "Prizes!" they all answered together, not really knowing why. High on the wall, written in large letters, was the question. "If it takes a man 4 days to hop from A to B, how many times will New Year's Day fall on hard times?" "Why," laughed Dora, "that's just nonsense. Silly, soppy, dopey. We'll never answer that." "The answer is very sensible," said the badger. "So think about it. And remember, you still have all your lifelines. You're just one question away from a million." The Willigrews looked puzzled and went to stand in a little huddle in the corner. The huddle was just big enough for 5. Red Badger explained that he had picked it up cheap in the antiques department at the local Huddles R Us store. Alas, hard as they tried, the Willigrews could not think of an answer to such a silly question. They were thinking of giving up and going home when Bromley remembered that Red Badger had said the answer was sensible. They all agreed that giving a sensible answer was worth a try. They all came out of the huddle, and Zambarina closed the door behind her. Bromley looked at Red Badger in the eye and said, "The answer is, always brush your teeth before going to bed." Everything went quiet. Red Badger broke the silence, but explained it was an old silence, so it didn't matter, by asking, "Confident? Final answer?" The Willigrews nodded. "Correct, Mondo. That is the right answer," shouted Red Badger. All the Willigrews hopped about and shouted, "Whoopie-doo, whoopie-doo," and so on. "But wait," said Red Badger, holding up a paw. "You have a choice of prizes. You can have free entry into the tunnel or an expensive state-of-the-art 150cm widescreen television and DVD player. Yes, you can record all your favourite programmes in the comfort of your own house." The Willigrews had never heard of televisions or DVD players, so they decided they would settle for free entry into the tunnel. "Then it only remains for me to wish you all the very best of luck. Having said that, Red Badger opened a door and the Willigrews went into the dark tunnel beyond. Red Badger had given them each a glowworm to light the way, so they marched forward through the tunnel, not saying anything, until Dora complained that her glowworm had gone out. It soon came back in, though, so they continued until Bromley shouted, "Stop!" and pointed to a large shadow on the wall up ahead. "Cripes! What is that?" gulped Dora. She did not have to wait long to find out, for just then a huge, hairy spider scuttled round the corner, growling and snarling. "Gotcha!" it screamed. "You're all doomed. I'm going to wrap you up in some silky webby stuff and suck your innards out." Its hairy legs bristled as the Willigrews drew back in fear. All except Longstint, that is, who stood his ground. Looking the spider straight in the eye, it only had one, he said loudly, "Wait a minute, you big hairy whelk. Spiders can't talk. Everyone knows that." The spider grinned sheepishly. "Can't they?" he asked. "Well, in that case, I suppose I'm not a spider. How embarrassing." He shuffled his feet as he looked at Longstint. "They do growl a bit, though, don't they?" "Oh, yes," Longstint agreed. "In my experience, they growl quite a lot, but they never talk. So be on your way and let us through." With that, the big spider skulked off round the corner, muttering to himself. "I wonder what I am, then. A pigeon. Perhaps I'm a pigeon." "Pigeons don't talk either," shouted Longstint after him. "They just go, coo." "Oh, all right then," said the spider crossly. "Don't keep on, I'm going." But as he disappeared into the dark tunnel, the Willigrews could hear him saying, "Coo, coo. I could be a pigeon, bloomin' know all." The others praised Longstint for being so brave and clever, and the journey continued. After much turning left, turning right, going straight on, doubling back, doubling forward, and standing still looking confused, the Willigrews came to an entrance, above which was a sign saying, "To Heford's Cave. If you wish to enter, be warned. The road to the truth is filled with great danger. Only the pure in heart, strong in mind, sound in body, and those wearing clean socks may enter. Please mind the step." "Sounds very nasty to me," said Dora Dingbat, hopping nervously from one foot to the other. "Don't worry, I'll mind the step," said Bromley as he led this little group through the entrance. They had only taken a few steps when they came upon another entrance and yet another sign, which read, "Are you sure now?" On went the little fivesome, through the entrance and onwards. Nothing much seemed to be happening. Zamborina was just about to say, "So far so good," when Longstint shouted out in pain. "Ah!" he yelled. "Get it off me!" Bromley spun around. To his horror, he saw that Longstint was being dragged away by a large earlug. An earlug, let me explain, is like an earwig, but it has its own hair. Longstint was clasped firmly in the earlug's pincers. He struggled and wriggled and fought bravely, and although he was in the army and stronger than most Willigrews, he was no match for the mighty earlug. The others gave chase, but as the insects scuttled off with their little friend, but they stopped when Longstint shouted, "Don't follow, please. You will all be in danger. The quest is more important than one Willigrew." "He's right," said Bromley sadly. "We must not follow." In the distance he could hear his friend shouting and struggling with his attacker. Then everything went quiet. Bromley heaved a great sigh. "We must go on now," he said. "Now we must succeed so that brave Longstint will not have died in vain." The 4 remaining Willigrews went on, tearfully but more determined than ever. As they made their way more wearily now along the tunnels, they noticed that the further they went, the colder it became. "Dear me," said Dora, "is it my imagination, or is it getting colder?" "Don't be silly, Dora," said Crowfin. "I'm cold too, and your imagination couldn't make me cold." As they spoke, a spiky, frozen little man came out from behind a rock. He was made entirely of ice and was wearing a T-shirt with "I am Jack Frost" printed on it. He spoke in a cold, raspy voice. "Hello, good evening and welcome. I'm Jack Frost and I'm hibernating for the summer. And you lot woke me up, So you'd better be on your way, or I'll be touching you, and you'll be freezing to death." "Missus," shouted Crowfin rather rudely as the Willigrews hurried past and rushed on down the tunnel. Jack Frost chased them, but they soon outpaced him. They did not look back. The danger was not over yet, though, not by a long way. The next thing they knew, Crowfin, in his haste, had run straight into a web of sticky strands which was strung across the tunnel. He was stuck fast. Well, he was running. "Help me! Help me!" he shouted. "I'm stuck fast!" Bromgley and Zamborina tried to get him free, but the strands were too sticky. Bromgley sensed serious danger, and he was right. Coming towards them along the tunnel was a creature that looked like a cross between a scorpion and a centipede. Sticking out from his head were 2 enormous eyes. It had about 50 little legs, but horror of horrors, at the end of its tail, which was arched above its back, was a huge, sharp stinger, poised, ready to strike Crowfin. There was nothing anyone could do to save him. The thing was now within striking distance. The Willigrews all groaned in terror. Then, just as the poisonous sting started its deadly journey, a small fairy shape burst from an opening in the tunnel wall, picked up a handful of dust and threw it straight into the monster's eyes. "Ah!" it screamed and started scuttling around blindly, banging its head against the walls. "Quick," said the rescuer. "No time to lose." Bromgley, dragging Crowfin from the web, gave a yelp of surprise when he realised that their rescuer was not just a little furry creature, but a Willigrew, and not just any Willigrew. It was Longstint. They escaped through a hole in the web and rushed down the tunnel, eventually taking shelter in a small cave. "Longstint, you're alive!" squealed Dora, hugging her little friend. "How did you escape?" "I managed to wriggle free somehow," he answered modestly. "But you're injured," Dora said, pointing out a cut on Longstint's arm. "Just a flesh wound," said Longstint, trying to look tough. "I'll live." Zamborina dressed his wound in a nice pair of blue trousers and a white shirt, and it was a much happier band that continued along the dark tunnel. A little further along, the tunnel narrowed, and everyone had to squeeze through sideways. Just as it widened again, the ground seemed to disappear suddenly, and with gasps and shouts, the Willigrews found themselves hurtling downwards into the darkness. The glowworms couldn't keep up. The fall seemed to last forever as they rolled down a damp, slippery slope. Then, with 5 bumps, they reached the bottom. "Ow! Ooh! Ouch! Oh! Ah!" "Everybody all right?" asked Bromgley with concern. They all said they were. "Where are we?" inquired Crowfin, peering into the gloom. Just then the glowworms caught up with them, and they saw that they had landed in a gigantic cave. "Look," said Dora, "furniture!" And indeed there was furniture arranged neatly throughout the cave. There were pictures on the walls and a log fire burning cheerfully. "Do you think this is it?" whispered Zamborina. "Heford's cave, I mean." "I don't know," said Longstint. "It's very big." "Wait a minute," said Dora excitedly. "Can you smell chickweed custard? I can definitely smell chickweed custard." They were all sniffing the air and agreeing with Dora when a little brown mouse with very long whiskers came through a door, pushing a trolley. He pushed the trolley up to a table and placed 5 bowls of custard on it with 5 spoons and 5 mugs filled with chickweed tea. Then, turning to the Willigrews, he said, "Heford welcomes you and asks you to eat and drink, and he will be with you in a while." The Willigrews immediately sat down at the table and started to eat. "Wicked," mumbled Crowfin through a mouthful. "This is delish." They had just finished when the mouse re-entered the cave. "Heford is coming," he announced. Through a different door, a much larger door, came what could only be described as a head on legs. Heford's head was huge and must have been 5 or 6 times bigger than his body, which, although not very big, was very muscular, probably due to his having to carry his huge head around. He was covered from head to foot in short, light brown, although he liked to call it taupe, hair. His eyes were bright green and his nose was a sort of purply pink, and he was a bit strange for someone who was supposed to know everything. "Welcome to my home," said Heford in a soft, friendly voice. "Thank you," said Bromgley, bowing politely. "We are honoured to meet you."
"It is I who should be honoured," said Heford. "Your tribe is one I admire very much, and you 5 have been very brave in making this dangerous journey."
"You have heard of the Willigrews?" asked Bromley hopefully.
"Why, of course. I have a special file in my brain marked Willigrews A to Z," replied Heford. "But first you must tell me your names."
After the introductions, Bromley asked Heford their big question. "What can you tell us about the very first Willigrew?"
All 5 Willigrews sat up very straight and waited for the reply.
Heford began.
"Long, long ago, in the days before flared trousers, space hoppers and kipper ties, when winter ended properly on the 1st of May, there lived a tribe called the Ironicons. Now this tribe had super brains and therefore loved peace. One day, however, a disease spread through the tribe. The disease could not be cured, so one by one the Ironicons died. When there were only a few left, they had a meeting to decide how to leave some of their wisdom and love of peace behind. After much discussion, they decided to try to create a new race of beings. So in a casserole dish, they mixed the following ingredients: 1 dove's feather, with the dove's permission, 1 teaspoonful of white cloud, 2 seeds from the honesty plant, 1 teaspoonful of spirit of adventure, 6 rose petals, pink, 1 gram of blue cloud, 1 pinch of salt, 1 drop of tincture of myrrh, 2 drops of tincture of less, 3 cups of self-raising flour, and 1 bag of cheese and onion crisps. Then they mixed the ingredients together and waited. Sadly, nothing happened, and finally they all died, and the Ironicons were extinct. Many years passed in the dead tribe's village, but strangely enough the casserole dish remained unaffected by time, still with the ingredients inside. One day there was a great storm which destroyed all the houses and trees. One mighty bolt of lightning struck the dish. The mixture, charged with electricity, began to bubble. Then it overflowed, some spilling onto the table. This went on for several hours, and then slowly, rising up from the dish, a green mist appeared. As the mist cleared, a little creature with a furry green body, big blue eyes, and pretty pink lips appeared. It stood looking confused until its attention was drawn to another cloud of mist which appeared next to it. After a while another creature appeared, smaller than the first, but looking just as beautiful. The little creatures looked at each other and smiled shyly. The smaller one looked a bit frightened, so the bigger one put its arm round it, and they wandered off. The only food they could reach, being so small, was chickweed, which, as you know, the Willigrews love. One night, as they walked through the forest, the 2 little creatures were attacked by a wild animal, and were rescued by tribesmen from the Willow tribe, so called because they lived in a willow tree. The 2 little travellers were well looked after by this tribe, who fed them, gave them shelter, and taught them how to speak. The 2 creatures settled with the Willow people and spent their days growing chickweed, which they needed to live. The Willow people called them the growers because of this. The creatures, however, preferred to be called Willow people, so they ended up being called Willow growers. This is a bit long, so eventually it became Willigrews, and after a while, Willigrews. The leader of the Willow people gave the 2 Willigrews names. The bigger one was to be called Bromley, which meant leader, and the smaller one was to be called Azurino because of her dazzling blue eyes. After many years among the Willow people, Bromley and Azurino had 5 children and were very happy. Something, however, was calling Bromley. He knew that he had to leave and start his own tribe, so they left their safe home and went searching. After much travelling and many adventures, they found the perfect spot and called it Willigrew. And that, my friends, is how your tribe started, said Heford, resting his huge head against the cave wall. Bromley and his friends sat in silence for a moment. Then Crowfin said, "Well, I'll be blowed, what an amazing story." The others agreed, and Bromley thanked Heford, who asked the brown mouse to give them a map. This map would show them a safer way to get back to ground level.
They parted with much waving and went on their way back to the tunnels. The journey to the surface was very steep, but much less dangerous, and in no time at all they were out in the open. They said goodbye to the glowworms and started the long journey back to Willigrew. All they talked about as they walked was Heford's story. Dora Dingbat said that if she ever had a female baby, she would call her Azurino. She looked at Longstint as she said it, and smiled and wrinkled and he smiled and wrinkled his nose. He looked better with a wrinkly nose. It took many days before they reached home, but they eventually arrived to see a banner strung across the main street. "Welcome home, brave Willigrews." A party was held in the meeting hall, and Bromley told Heford's story to everyone. When they heard about the dangerous journey the 5 Willigrews had undertaken, everyone praised Longstint for his great courage. The commander of the army promoted him on the spot. Then Longstint was asked to make a speech. Wrinkling his nose in happiness, Longstint stood on a table to speak. He thanked everyone for such a wonderful party, with lovely food, especially the chickweed burgers. He then announced that he and Dora Dingbat had decided to become Willigrew and wife. All the Willigrews cheered and hopped about backwards on one leg, flicking their earlobes. So that was chapter 3 of the Willigrews, and we will be reading chapter 4 later, so we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.